Good afternoon. My name's Janine Watson. I'm the director of this production of Romeo and Juliet for Bell Shakespeare Learning. We'd like to welcome everyone joining us this afternoon and for witnessing the performance via our live stream. We're so excited we were able to bring that to you. Just want to acknowledge that in Western society, we think that Shakespeare has been right. We've been doing Shakespeare's plays for centuries and that he's so ancient, but actually it's a drop in the ocean compared to the amount of time that the traditional landowners and the traditional custodians have been telling stories on this land. So we would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation today and pay our respects to the elders past, present and future. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians on the lands from which you are watching this and pay our respects to elders past and present future where you are. Okay, I'm going to throw to the cast to introduce themselves now. We'll start here.
My name is Annalie and I play the nurse.
I'm Genevieve Cheng. I play Montague, Messenger and Lady Capulet.
Hi, my name is Paul Reichstein. I play Friar Lawrence, Lord Capulet and the Prince.
Hi, my name is Caitlin Burley and I play Juliet.
Hi, I'm Will. I play Romeo.
Hi, my name is Tarira Mavondo and I play Benvolio.
Hi, my name's Jack Crumlin. I play Tybalt and Paris.
Hi guys, my name's Rowan Davey and I play Mercutio and the Apothecary.
Wonderful. Okay, so we're just going to kick off with some questions here that come directly from the schools who we've performed to. I'm going to throw you down to you, Rowan, at the end there. The question is from Mackenzie, and how do you approach learning your lines or learning Shakespeare in particular?
Well, Mackenzie, that's a great question. Thank you for asking. I think with lines, you know, we get a lot of these sort of questions as actors. For me, there's a couple things. You know, if you're doing Shakespeare, obviously, firstly, read the play and really try and understand every single word in that play. You know, you can easily sort of read something and just sort of skim through it, but with Shakespeare, you know, there's incredible depth to it, and you have to sort of use your imagination and go through each scene. And so even more than just understanding your lines, you really understand what your character's doing in the scene, and so that you're able to play and lift it off the page. And then for me, I've actually found a great app called Line Learner, which I put my lines into that app, and it allows you to sort of do the scene in your head. And generally I sort of go around the kitchen, make some food, walk around the space, because you want to really put it into your body. That's the key. You want to be able to take the lines away from the page so that you can play and work with your other actors.
Great, thank you, Rowan. Actually, I think that app is very popular with a lot of actors now, and it feeds the other characters' lines back to you. So you actually do get to do the scene, and it helps it go in, as Rowan said, from a physical point of view. I'm going to move to a question now for Will, actually. So can Will have a mic? This is an interesting question. Do you think that Romeo and Juliet were romantic or stupid in their actions? And the question comes from St Mary's College. Will?
St Mary's College, thank you for the question. It's a very, very interesting one. I think, however, given the production or this version of the production that you just watched, I think the idea of romance and stupidity doesn't really come into it. I think the reason why they do what they do is because there's a real need on the part of these two young people who are not like anyone else in this town to find someone that they can relate to and they can talk to. You know, Romeo, he doesn't jump the wall of the orchard and talk to Juliet because he says, oh, this will make her like me. Like, he goes to see her because he thinks that he has no other options. There's no one else he can talk to. There's nowhere else that, you know, he can be safe with someone and be open and express himself and be truly who he is. And also, I don't think stupidity comes into it. I think that's a very cynical way of looking at it. Were they a bit naive? Maybe. But I think the thing that everyone forgets, and I think it's sort of symptomatic of this kind of victim-blaming culture that we have, is the fact that Romeo and Juliet do not break the law. They don't do anything wrong. All they are doing is being in love. It's everyone around them that's perpetuating this blood feud, this war which is illegal and which is wrong, that is forcing their hand. And, you know, because of that, because of what's going on, it's an intense situation, and these are intense circumstances, and these people in those intense situations are prone to intense reactions. So I think it's not necessarily about romance, and I certainly don't think they're stupid. I think it just comes from a need to try and change the world around them, which is a violent world. It's an unkind world, for the better.
Great, thanks, Will. That's terrific. Okay, so this question is about the play itself. I'm going to throw to Paul for this one. Why is it important to continue to reimagine this play? And in addition to that, what does it continue to teach us? And it's from Sinead College. Paul.
Great question. I think it's there's something we say a lot about Shakespeare, which is that it's universal, and I think that's all well and good, but I think things need to be reimagined to prove that they're universal. I don't think it's enough just to put on Romeo and Juliet because it's always been on the curriculum. I think it needs to be, for you to get anything out of it, we need to do a good job of building a world for you that you can hopefully recognise, so that you can see characters in this that aren't running around in tights with ruffs and suddenly you're alienated from this story. But what Janine's tried to do, and all the designers with this particular show, is create a world that you'll see in urban Australia and characters that you have in your own family, in a sense. So I think the reason that Romeo and Juliet needs to be reimagined and always presented to young people is because I think it's reflective of the world we live in. We live in a very fragmented world, and Romeo says it, he has much to do with hate, but more with love. And I think the power of this story is seeing, it's the death of youth and the death of innocence. Young people being wrapped up in the bad decisions of adults. And I think that's what it continues to say, because there's feuding factions and families and cultures all over the globe. And what is sacrificed? I think it's young people, it's young voices, through no fault of their own. Yeah.
Great, thanks so much for that, Paul. This question is pretty important to our production, so I'm very glad it's being asked. It's what was the thinking behind Juliet's androgyny and the physicality or the boxing aspect? The question comes from Emmanuel School. I'm going to throw obviously to Kate for that question.
Yeah, it is a really great question. The thinking comes back to what Will was saying about the world. It is a violent world, and like our world, like Shakespeare's world, we have two very binary extremes of what gender is. Juliet is told her option is to marry, whereas with the men, Tybalt counts it not a sin to strike him dead at the party. Mercutio is saying calm, vile, honourable submission. Men, it's draw if you be men. It is manly to fight. And I think in this play, it's more interesting, and Shakespeare wrote it in, I think, that these two young people are, for one, they're young, so they are not yet sure of who they are. They are discovering who they are. I think she comes across as androgynous because we have such polarizing views of girls in dresses. Juliet should have long hair and be, sweet and subservient, but she is headstrong. We have all the falconry imagery, which is cut in this version, but in Shakespeare's version, he, from the get-go, saw that Juliet was definitely trying to defy the limitations of her gender by comparing him to a young falcon, which were in those times usually female actually, and her a falconer, which is male. Why boxing? It's a dangerous world. I think she's preparing herself. I think as young people are today, capable, incredibly capable and resourceful. If we look at the movements in America, it is the young people who are changing the status quo and who are challenging the adult world. And I think she is being resourceful. She is trying to prepare herself for life outside the high orchard walls. I think there's a lot in the text that supports this view that Janine's taken. And the other thing is she's usually portrayed as someone quite typically feminine, and not all girls are like that. So Janine and I and the cast, and I'm really glad that we get to share this version with you, that not all girls are like that. It's great to be like that, but there are many other ways of behaving. So she comes across as androgynous, but I think she's simply being herself. And boxing, because she's preparing herself, she's strong.
She's very strong. And even on the balcony scene, there's so much in her text on the balcony scene that we interpret and have a received perception of as being heavily romantic. But if you go back to the language, everything she asks him is, what are you doing here?
This
You're
is
going
dangerous.
to die. It's
The
absolutely
place
dangerous.
Death, considering who thou art.
They will murder thee if they
And
see
he's all
thee.
like, oh, night's cloak,
He's the
love's
romantic
wings,
one,
and
yeah.
and we see Shakespeare subvert the genders in some of the sonnets as well. So like
Yeah.
he was so privy to the huge spectrum of expression that human beings were capable of.
I agree. Thanks, Kate. Very comprehensive answer. Okay, so the next question is, how long have you been performing? And the question's from Bunbury Senior High School. I'm going to actually throw to Anna for this question to start first. Could Anna have a mic, Paul?
I've been performing an awfully long time. I came from a family where my father was a fireman, and he used to pay us 20 cents if we learned a song all the way through. And we got 10 cents if we learned a harmony. And it wasn't long before we were singing for a lot of people and making a bit of money. When I was 12, I started busking on the streets of Sydney around the rocks. I think my brother and I were the first buskers in Sydney, which is a bit of a claim. And then I wanted something more. I was sent away to a summer camp with ATYP, Australian Theatre for Young People, and I met people that were like me. I went to a state school that was very sport, and I was so not. And I always felt a little bit outside, and I found people that thought like me and that were interested in telling stories. So I became very, very interested in the theatre. And so from there, I did a lot of community theatre. I did the Diary of Anne Frank at a community theatre club when I was about 12. And yeah, sort of progressed from there and had a wonderful time. And of course, I've been in the profession for an awfully long time and have loved it.
Thanks, Anna. That's an amazing story. Amazing. Jen, do you want to have a go at that question too?
I've been directing, well, no, not continuously, but I started writing, directing and performing my own plays when I was 9. I used to love subjecting my year 4 classmates to watching me perform. And then I studied theatre at university. But in the late 90s, early noughties, when I was breaking into the industry, it was difficult being a non-Anglo performer. And I realised at that point that being versatile as much as possible was going to stand me in good stead. I ended up gravitating towards physical theatre and dance, formal dance. I ended up going to London and studying dance, and I worked there for 5 years in dance theatre. Then I moved to China and I performed there for 3 years. And by the time I came back to Australia, I had shifted my focus to a writing practice. And it's only been the last 2 years that I've come back into the acting industry. And I think it's a combination of me being older now, and also that the consciousness about representation has elevated, that I'm finding more interesting roles and work that I want to do, and there's more of it as well.
Great, thank you so much. And, you know, there's such a varying degree of experience in this cast. You know, some of the actors went to drama school, some didn't. Will, you know, had his start in a different way. Do you want to, Jen, pass that quickly to Will just for a moment? Do you want to just give us a quick summation of your time?
Yeah, so I haven't been to drama school, received no formal training in that aspect. What I did do, though, was I when I was little, like late primary school, year 4, year 5, year 6, I did summer courses at NIDA because they do that, and I would highly recommend anyone who is looking to, you know, start with the basic principles of acting, or if anything, just wants to do group performance and, you know, really free yourself from those sort of those worries about, oh, will people think I look funny or whatever. Like, forget about that. Just go to these classes. They are amazing. And then from there, my tutor asked me to audition for this TV pilot. It didn't take off, but the director knew I had no agent, and he was kind enough to help me get one. And then from there, I actually got a start on Home and Away, which I did for 3 years. And it was kind of like my baptism of fire in a way. But you know, that was how I started out. So, you know, there's a lot of different ways to break into the industry and to start to start acting. You know, you don't have to go to drama school, and you don't have to not go to drama school. I think really it's whatever suits you. It's whatever you want. Some people gravitate more towards formal training and a sort of a set technique, and other people are a bit more, I don't know, instinctual, I guess is maybe the word. I'm not sure. It's very subjective, but yeah, there's a lot of different ways to do it.
Great, thanks, Will. I'm going to move on to the next question, which is a very important one for me. How many people are involved in the production overall? So in our production, as you can see, this set is quite magnificent. We have a design team that helped create this. We have the design comprises of lighting, sound, costume. Our production team is incredible because we have a bunch of people who then have to go and make this happen, build it, make sure it's engineered so it's safe. For me, my stage managers are a really important aspect of this process. They're with us in the room for the beginning. Eva Tandy and Ruth Hollows are our stage managers on this production. They're with the cast every day. It's their production now. Once it gets in the theatre, the stage managers really take over in terms of keeping the show on track. Ruth makes sure all the props are in the right spot and basically keep the actors from going, quietly crazy some days. But also another couple of very important people on this were our voice coach, Jess Chambers, who helps not only with the voices but with managing the Shakespeare text in a space like this theatre, which you can't see the seating bank from where you are, but it's quite a big theatre. And our fight director, who's also a movement coordinator as well, his name's Nigel Poulton. We have some excellent fight choreography in this show. I'm going to get the Rowan and Jack to demonstrate part of the fight that you see in the middle of the show now. Do you want to just take it away, guys? Great. I'm actually really scary up close. Thank you so much. I'm going to get Jack. Jack is the fight captain on the show. You need someone on track every day who's going to basically keep the fight choreography together and watches the other fights to make sure those actors are taking care of that work as well. Rowan and Jack have been training together for quite some time now. Do you want to talk us through the fight from that top?
For sure, yes. So Nigel Poulton has taken us through a process of developing skills as a cast in movement and fight choreography. And then what we do is we take those skills and then we put them into a choreography, just like you would if you were building a dance sequence or something like that. So if we go through this moment in our fight between Tybalt and Mercutio, what we start off with is a moment where we will form postures. This is called being on guard. You'll see it in many different shapes, in fencing and in dueling and that kind of thing. Obviously, I'm using a katana, which is a Japanese weapon. Rowan is using a cutlass, so we have different styles of fighting. And in this first section we do is about finding distance. So we're trying to figure out how far away each other are before then Rowan goes, pulls my parry across, which is called a feint, and cuts to my shoulder here. Then we move into the first sequence here, which is a series of cuts. What we move into here is an exercise which is called sombrata. And it's a pattern of 5 cuts and parries that if we wanted to, we could continue to do endlessly. And we've built that into the choreography so that now we punctuate, changing levels as we go, and finding a moment here where Tybalt sort of overpowers Mercutio and gives Mercutio the choice of whether or not to continue with the fight. No.
Thanks, guys. And Jack, that was really, really clear. And obviously you can see through that the technique that's gone into building that. It looks fast and furious. And for me, even, I know what went into it. It looks very spontaneous, but it's very choreographed. And a great demonstration. Thanks, guys. I'm going to move on to my next question. If Toriro, can I grab you? Because this question involves you. The question is, why did a female actor play the character of Benvolio And why did Benvolio take on the narrator role?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So, where I guess gender politics and identity politics are quite potent and prevalent in the society that we're living today, and specifically in the version that we've chosen to tell. So Benvolio is sort of gender fluid, and we discussed this for a long time. So Benvolio doesn't really identify as female or male. So sometimes he feels like more of a he, and sometimes he feels like a she. And so they is probably a good term to use. And I think, it's very current, sort of as young people are kind of battling and exploring their identities to represent Benvolio in this way. And also, so the second question's for me very, very important. So why is Benvolio the narrator character? And we talked about this, and usually it's the prince, and it's usually the adult choral members who are kind of the voice of the narrator voice, the voice of reason, the voice...
Or a warning.
The warning. But it's actually quite powerful having a young person who is implicit in the violence and who has directly felt the impact of violence. He's lost pretty much everybody that was dear to him. And so I think having a young person's voice saying, no, enough is enough, no more violence. Violence is not going to solve things in a healthy manner, in a sustainable manner. Actually, let's move towards love, and I think is quite powerful. And we talked a lot about the youth movements in the States, especially the gun control movement that emerged because of the Florida shootings, and young people have said, this is enough, no more violence, and have led those movements, and the power that young people's voices can have. They can be political, they can be active. I think that was sort of where we were going with that.
That's right. Thanks, Truro. And you do that so beautifully as well. Great. So we'll just move on to the next question now, which is a question for everybody. Let's start down the end here with Rowan. The question is... what is your favourite scene or your hardest scene? And just a short answer from everyone would be great. Thank you.
Very good. Well, playing Mercutio, he's a lot of fun. I sort of feel like he is just like drinking a pint of coffee, and you've just got to get up and get on his train. So when I do that, I find all of his scenes really, really fun. Obviously, the death is amazing when you can get it right. But actually, I'm finding the funnest part is the conjuring, when he conjures Rosaline, Romeo's sort of ex-girlfriend-ish, just because he's just having so much fun. He's kind of drunk after the party, and it's just a lot of fun.
For me, I love the fight scene, obviously, that we just demonstrated for you there, but also playing Paris. Towards the end of the play, he has this beautiful scene with Juliet and the friar where he is just completely oblivious to sort of everything that is happening, and his ignorance and his naivety I just really love playing with, and I think it's fun.
I think for Benvolio, it's definitely the party scene. That's the scene where he's just letting loose and is like, hey, and like just having a party and just going crazy.
I can answer both of those quickly. Favourite scene would be the morning after the balcony scene, when Romeo meets up again with Benvolio and Mercutio, and they have that wonderful wordplay. I love that. There's a real sense of brotherhood between the three of them. You can tell that these are young people who have known each other all their lives, and they're best friends. And I think it's one of my favourite scenes because it's such a wonderful contrast to the sadness that we get later on. It's part of what breaks your heart every single time, as you see just how close these young men were. And then the hardest thing to do is the scene in the tomb, not specifically my death, but just the whole thing, because Romeo and Paris fight and Paris dies as well. And it's sort of this lovely thing where Jack was talking about how Paris, sometimes maybe he lacks self-awareness, but in that moment it's just two boys who are really, really scared, and they don't know what's going to happen, and they want things to turn out okay, but they're not going to. It's hard to do because it's just so heartbreaking.
I really enjoy all of it. There's always one who says that. I'm going to say my favourite scene to watch, because I can't choose Juliet's, is always the death of Mercutio and Tybalt, and when then we just go into this rabbit hole of violence, because it's so sad when we see that this guy suddenly dies and he didn't mean to, and just how serious everything can get so quickly. I think that's just really great dramaturgically.
Thank you. Favourite scene, definitely the first Friar and Romeo scene. The Friar I just love because he's earthy, and I think his god is Mother Nature itself, and that's what he invests in. But I just love seeing this ridiculously exuberant youth come into my little patch of heaven there, and just is so excited about this love. And I like Friar's response, that he wants to nurture that, and he wants him to be safe, and has this great idea that maybe this will fix all the problems.
As a player, my favourite and hardest scene is the Capulet family scene, when we force Juliet's hand to marry Paris. We all just travel such a huge emotional arc in that scene, and it's a massive turning point. The stakes are so high, and because of what happens in that scene, it really pushes the play to its tragic conclusion.
As far as enjoyable scenes, when the nurse comes to message Romeo and finds him with Mercutio and Benvolio, and we have so much fun. I have so much fun with Rowan singing the song and fooling about. I always look forward to it. The hardest scene to play for me would be what is seen as the nurse's betrayal of Juliet, when she says, "Look, forget Romeo, and I think it's best that you marry the County Paris." It's always seen as a betrayal, but when you think of it, the nurse sees in that family conflict that if she doesn't go down that path, Juliet could very well be thrown out on the street and nurse with her. And so I think she makes a very, very tough decision to advise Juliet against the marriage with Romeo and to pursue Paris. Yeah, and I find that quite hard emotionally every time. It's a difficult thing to break to Juliet.
Wonderful. Thanks, guys, for answering those. Okay, I'm going to answer one quick question before we have to wrap it up. The question that I have here, this one's from Emmanuel School. Why did the lighting designer choose to shine the bright white lights into the audience's eyes at the end? And I'm going to answer that because I think it's firstly a great question to acknowledge what was a very deliberate choice. By doing that, all of a sudden the audience is implicated in this situation that seems very contained to the stage, but then by feeling the lights on the audience, when I've been in the audience, I hear students responding and saying, why are they doing that? Or getting surprised. And it basically places the audience in the middle of the action and creates this otherworldly, dreamlike aspect to it that enhances our idea that this whole thing happens as a memory told by Benvolio. So that's the reason behind that. In terms of the questions, we will have to wrap it up there, and I just want to take them a moment to make some acknowledgements again. We'd like to thank our friends at the Sydney Opera House who have co-presented both the season and the live stream of Romeo and Juliet. Such a massive effort, and their teamwork has been so thoroughly appreciated. We'd like to thank the Australian government, with whose support we have been able to deliver the live stream to all the corners of Australia, as well as offer disadvantaged schools subsidised tickets to the show. And it's so important that we get to reach, all areas, and that these stories are told not just in the main cities, but, regionally and rurally. And as always, our wonderful national schools partner Foxtel. We next head south for our season. We're presenting this show at the Arts Centre in Melbourne from the 28th to the 31st of August. So in advance, we'd like to thank our partners down at the Victorian Arts Centre as well. Thank you guys for your questions. Thank you everyone for watching and for joining us today and for the show.